And we're ready to go.
But international.
Thank you.
Okay.
I hope we are going to be live within the next couple of seconds so that our audience can have an access to our webinar. And I would like to welcome a very warm, to offer a very warm welcome to the audience who is watching us at the moment in Europe, in North America, but in particular watching from Cambodia. As we are discussing today, a very important topic about the latest situation in Cambodia in the aftermath of the so-called trials. We can call them so-called trials because it was a sham process where the opposition leaders led by the acting president of the Cambodia National Rescue Party, Sam Rainsy, have been put in a rushed trial through the politicized courts of Cambodia and have been announced guilty for attempted coup in the country, just by the virtue of them trying to go back to their country and to join their own people in 2019. The court was extremely harsh. Within a matter of 2 months, without his presence and without the presence of his leaders, it sentenced Sam Rainsy to notorious 25 years prison sentence. His colleagues, the leaders from the Cambodia National Rescue Party, were all given sentences between 20 and 22 years imprisonment, all of them disabilitated from being part of the political process in the country. Not only them, 130 other supporters and followers of the Cambodia National Party have been treated as accomplices and have been sentenced by the Cambodian courts. This has actually turned the country not only into a one-party state in political terms by having the governing party controlling the parliament and the Senate, but it cements its idea that nobody will be able in the future to challenge the government of longest-serving Prime Minister Hun Sen, who is there for 37 years. A lot of people follow the news around the world, what is happening in Myanmar, Burma, and it's really tragic to see the junta there grabbing power and killing its own people. At the same time, in Cambodia, the destiny has been same, converted country into the hands and the wishes of one person, his clique, without possibility for any opposition to raise their voice. We're going to discuss that today and what would be the international response to what Sam Rainsy calls daily coup with a very distinguished panel. We're delighted to have together with us Sam Rainsy, the acting president of the Cambodia National Rescue Party, Hans van Balen, president of honor of Liberal International and president of the European Liberal Democrats, Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe Party, and Svenja Han, member of European Parliament from the German FDP party, part of the Renew Europe group, and vice president of the European Liberal Forum. Without further ado, because the time is precious, I would start by addressing Mr. Rainsy or Rainsy, you first. You have been declared guilty for attempted coup, even though you were not allowed to step on the soil of your own motherland, Cambodia, in 2019. How do we take this decision of the politicized courts in Cambodia?
I think the mass trials and all the sentences that have been pronounced against the opposition leadership, including myself, all these measures are intended to eliminate the opposition from the political scene. Concerning my case personally, and those of my colleagues, 9 of us have been sentenced to very heavy jail terms. Without allowing us to defend ourselves, we are prevented from going back to Cambodia to show up at the court to defend ourselves. We are not allowed to go back. They want to prosecute us without our presence. This shows their intention. They want to have a free hand to say whatever they want, to accuse us of all kinds of crimes, and then to sentence us. Those sentences are intended to prevent us from returning. Even if we want to return now, we are prevented physically, militarily, from going back, from setting foot on the soil of Cambodia. And on top of that, sentences are accumulating, being more and more heavy against us. They want to shut all doors, all opportunities, all possibilities for the opposition to resume its fight for democracy in Cambodia.
And Rainsy, we can even say that you are lucky. You are lucky because you're outside of the country together with a number of your colleagues, the exile leaders. Lucky in the sense that you are escaping the very notorious prisons of Cambodia. However, 130 colleagues of yours, many of them who are in the country, do not have that possibility to escape. They're in prisons. What is their fate?
The fate of opposition leaders and of opposition activists, those who have been the most active, there are only three possibilities. One, they are killed. Union leader Chirichir was killed. Government critic Kamlay was killed a few years ago. Journalists, trade unionists were killed. So this is the first measure to eliminate any dissent voice, eliminate physically. The second, I myself, I forgot to mention that I myself escaped several assassination attempts. And since I founded the first opposition party in Cambodia, 80 of my colleagues have been assassinated. I have attended countless funerals because of this physical elimination. So the second possibility is jail. I myself lost my freedom. I had to escape to the United Nations Bureau, to the American Embassy, and once I was caught and nearly killed at the Ministry of Interior, but thanks to the last-minute intervention of the Japanese embassy, the American embassy, I was nearly killed. But I lost my freedom, and this is the case of my colleague Kem Sokha. Kem Sokha, when I resigned in 2017 in order to prevent the dissolution of my party, then Kem Sokha took up the position as a new president, but he was arrested anyway. And he is still now under surveillance. He cannot leave the country. So myself, Samransi, I cannot go back to Cambodia. And my colleague, he cannot leave Cambodia. So the Hun Sen regime wants to separate us, not to allow the opposition leaders could meet and could work together. And on top of that, as you have just said, dozens, nearly 100 have been arrested. Some have been released, but there are charges pending on them. They could be arrested or re-arrested anytime. So this creates an atmosphere of fear and intimidation. The sentence against us, the sentence against those who are in Cambodia, who are in jail now, it's intended to create this atmosphere of fear, intimidation. The message to the Cambodian people is that don't join the opposition. Either you get killed, like some of them already, or you get jailed, like many of them now. So the message is very clear. And the third possibility for those who fight for democracy in Cambodia is to go into exile. If you don't want to be killed, if you want to escape jail in order to have freedom, to keep the means to communicate, to work, to promote democracy, to expose the truth in Cambodia, you have to go into exile. But the people, even they are in jail in Cambodia, they remain true to themselves. They live up their principle, and they can assure all of us, including Kem Sokha. Kem Sokha, even though he cannot speak freely, he has let us know in several ways, discreet way, that he doesn't want to betray. Hun Sen has threatened him, has enticed him, tried to entice him with privilege and many favors. He said, no, I remain loyal to the opposition. I am waiting for the opportunity to meet with Sam Rainsy again, and we will make the opposition even stronger as before. It is why Hun Sen's measure to intimidate us does not work. We keep our intention, our determination to continue our fight.
Rainsy, I said that you are privileged to have escaped Cambodia and to be in exile in freedom. However, we learn that the regimes in the region tend to cooperate in inspiring themselves how much they can oppress their people. It seems what is happening in Burma has been inspired by what is happening in Cambodia. And of course, there is a permanent inspiration in Vietnam, who has sent their agents on European soil to actually look for the people who are being political opponents tried by the regime. But in Europe, you have supporters. And when you decided in 2019 to return together with a number of exiled leaders, you got a huge support from members of the European Parliament and from politicians across the board. One of them was Hans van Balen, at that time member of the European Parliament, leader of the European Liberals. He won from the regime in Phnom Penh an award, and that award was being a blacklisted person from entering Cambodia because he was supporting your natural desire to return home. He was blacklisted with a number of people, to which the European Union intervened and reacted. Hans, according to the Cambodian courts, or as Rainsy calls them, kangaroo courts, you are an accomplice to a coup. Do you feel like an accomplice to a coup?
Well, first of all, Emil, I have much respect for Rainsy and his people, because they fight for freedom every day. And I'm very happy that Sven Han has taken initiative for a resolution in the European Parliament. What I did, either as president of Liberal International or in the European Parliament, was just to be of help. And you remember that what you get is that I'm blacklisted in Russia, in Nicaragua, you remember over there, blacklisted in Cambodia, and maybe even in other countries. Well, that's a small thing for me, because what happens to Rainsy and his people is much more terrible. I mean, I can suffer this small thing. And that I'm now an accomplice, I see this as an honorary title, because again, we should support people who are oppressed, whether it's in Burma, whether it's in Cambodia and many other countries. We should fight on. So I'm not impressed, but I'm very much worried about this terrible sentence. It was unfortunately to be expected. Not that it was 25 years, but it is a harsh regime. The judges have no independence. The prosecutors are not independent. And what you said, it's over more than 20 years. And the real problem is that China is helping all those regimes, or Russia is, or both, they are doing so. So our sanctions, and I'm pleading again for sanctions like Svenja has also done, are not that effective because China is helping out. So we should, behind the scenes, talk to China that this will have grave implications, that we can't accept that China is supporting the regime of Hun Sen, the military now in Myanmar, and many other regimes which suppress, let me say, people and human rights and the rule of law. But I'm proud that I'm on blacklists in this case. Thank you, Emil.
Thank you, Hans. As you said, the authoritarian leaders, the dictators around the world seem to cooperate very well in the way how they're going to eliminate those who are fighting for freedom and who are serving as inspiration. But they obviously do not take into account that the number of those freedom fighters is ever growing. And young people are joining that front, or people from politicians from the younger generation. Among them is Svenja Han, who used to be, in her younger days, president of the Young European Liberals, being elected as one of the youngest members of the European Parliament. And if the dictators around the world thought that there is going to be a young person who is not going to fight for the rights not only of the Europeans, but also on a global fight for freedom, they were wrong. Svenja turned into a fighter for justice and freedom and for influence of Europeans in sharing their values globally in the European Parliament. Svenja, you were champion on the position of the European Union on Burma, Myanmar last month, and you had another passionate, emotional speech yesterday when you tabled the European Parliament resolution on the latest situation in Cambodia. What is your personal reaction you can share with us, and what is the reaction of the European Parliament?
Thank you very much, Emil, for your very kind words. Well, I got into politics because I thought it is so unfair that inside the EU, it still makes a difference where a young person is coming from, and it makes a difference for your life chances. And that is why I started working with economic politics. That is why I worked with the trade committee, with the single market committee, because when you have a good economy, you can build yourself a good life. And I believe that trade is not just for the sake of itself. Trade is a tool to empower people on both sides of the trading partner. Trade is a tool to lift people out of poverty, to have them create the life they want, to empower them. And that as well means supporting our partners in the struggles that they're facing. And with Cambodia, we have a special relationship. We have this special relationship, the so-called Everything But Arms agreement, this cooperation which is part of helping less developed countries in their economic development. And the minimum for that is respecting human rights. And this is how it has been starting in the last year with this partial withdrawal, because unfortunately the Cambodian government was not willing to make the commitments needed to keep this intact, which was restoring democracy. And I absolutely believe that we as the European Union have the duty to support the civil society and the opposition in their strive for democracy and in their strive for freedom, especially as trade partners, especially as partner in this special agreement. And as Europeans, and especially as a German, which is with a history with a lot of illiberal states, with a history that had to fight very hard for democracy, as Europeans that had to fight hard for peace, I think it's our duty to support other countries. And we do not only have that, we also have the tools to put pressure on the regime. We have tools to support the opposition. And we've been doing that on Myanmar, and we should be doing that on Cambodia. And of course, a military coup is a much more higher topic in the media. Unfortunately, Cambodia is not getting so much media attention as the situation would deserve in the EU. But nevertheless, it is important to shine a light on. And this is what we're doing in the European Parliament. Of course, we're not a legislative power, but we're giving a light, we're giving a stage on the situation in Cambodia. And we're making very, very clear demands towards the Commission and the Council that this is not acceptable. The civil society must be supported, the opposition must be supported, and the relations with the regimes needs to be reevaluated. It cannot be that that European money is supporting a regime, may it be in development money or in any other form of cooperation. And that is why we've been pushing so much for a clear resolution in the parliament.
And let us make clear, you adopted resolution yesterday that you have tabled, and remarkably, 90% of the MEPs who voted in favor. This kind of unity doesn't happen very often. How do you explain this, so to say, European unity among all political parties and all political profiles in supporting this very sharply worded resolution?
Because what is happening in Cambodia, and our stance on this, is very much about the values and fundamental values about the European Union. It's about standing up for democracy. It's about standing up for citizens' rights. I absolutely do believe that this is the core of it. And human rights is not something politicians should just be talking in their so-called Sunday speeches, as we say in Germany. This is something we actually need to do. And finally, we actually have a tool with it, the so-called Magnitsky Act, the new human rights mechanism. And I absolutely believe we need to target the regime where it hurts, and that as well means target them with individual sanction, with asset freezes, with travel bans. We as the EU need to work on that with our partners. We need to use the tools that we have at hand, and we need to talk about as well. And I'm very happy that we kept that in. The EPP tried to get that out. I do not believe we should get the regime any symbolic win. The next awesome meeting was supposed, the Asia-Europe meeting was supposed to happen in Cambodia. I think this should not happen. This would be such a symbolic win. And I'm very happy that we managed to have this in and actually keep it in, because it is as well those might look like a small thing, but it's actually about those topics as well.
Emil, before we go further, could I say a few words here?
Sure, Rainsy, please, of course.
Yesterday, the 11th of March, was a historic day for Cambodia and for democracy. On behalf of my colleagues, and I would say on behalf of a large part of the Cambodian people, the majority of the Cambodian people, I would like to express my deep gratitude to the European Parliament, and especially to the liberal group, ALDE Renew group, who have spearheaded this move, very timely, very effective move, very promising move to support or to restore democracy in Cambodia. Thank you to you, Svenja. You made a very convincing, very passionate speech. I listened several times, listened and re-listened to your intervention. It's very moving. And many of my colleagues feel the same. So thank you to all the liberal family, especially in the European Parliament, but there are many others among politicians all over Europe, all over the world. We will always remember your contribution one day to the restoration of democracy in the near future. Thank you.
Emil, if I also may add a word to the sound words of Rainsy. The Renew Group has, let me say, freedom and human rights in its veins, in its DNA. And in general terms, also the European Parliament. But now, also Josep Borrell, the High Representative for Foreign Affairs, should take action, the Commission, and also the member states, because a resolution is important, very important, but now we need action. And the problem is always that the member states are not too active in this respect, also not the guarantor states who have guaranteed the peace in Cambodia and democracy. They are not that active. But I hope, and Svenja will know, whether Borrell will act and will respond in a positive way. Let's hope for that.
I mean, Hans, I just wanted to actually to pick up your ideas on that, because you are a type of politician who does not talk, you act. And we have those of us who had the privilege to know you for years know that when we talk to you, we know that your words will turn into deeds. And we have seen you active. We have seen you on the streets of Maidan in Kiev when the revolution was taking place. We have seen you across the world. As you said, you were in Nicaragua being protected from the mobs who wanted to lynch you and kill you just because you called for democracy. You have a standing to know that supporting freedom actually means supporting in action. How would you compare what Europe does towards Cambodia with what it does in other countries like Belarus or Russia, or even latest in Myanmar? And what kind of lessons should we draw from there?
Well, again, the European Parliament is quite sound on this. Also, every time there are urgency resolutions on human rights, and they get large support in the end. We have to fight for it. Renew has to fight for it. Svenja has to fight for it. But in the end, the Parliament does its work. But Borrell, the Commission, the member states are not that active. And what my role is then as ALDE party president is to connect to our leaders, to our prime ministers, to the French president, because they have power. They can make that difference. They should not just sit idly by. So we should use this little network, but also I'm talking normally with also Social Democrats and with EPP, because again, for instance, in Germany, the CDU, CSU plays an important role with Merkel and also after Merkel. So we should try to connect everything in this case. And what I said earlier, some things concerning China, helping out all those terrible regimes, we have a draft comprehensive agreement on investment with China, which was rushed through just before the new year. And we can say to China, but I would do it behind closed doors, we won't ratify if you keep on supporting Hun Sen, the military in Myanmar, etc. So we should also be tough. And well, let's go on that course to put China under pressure, and also Russia when it is applicable.
So taking action is what is needed. Rainsy, you have been involved in the international affairs for many years, and actually thanks to your network and your engagement, the democratic movement in Cambodia does have traction and does have support, sympathy, and actually people who are ready to stand behind you and behind the Democrats and freedom fighters of Cambodia. What do you think should be the next step of the international community? We saw the resolution of the European Parliament adopted yesterday, and we also have seen the Americans taking an action saying that some people should be blacklisted. But what is it that you suggest in terms of strong international response?
First, I think and I beg all our friends never to recognize fait accompli. Fait accompli that are violations of basic human rights, basic democratic principle, and violation of our conscience. Powerful countries such as Russia, China, they like to impose fait accompli. And unfortunately, the free world cannot resist and finally accept fait accompli. But coming from a small dictator, from a small country like Hun Sen, we should not accept his fait accompli. China can impose the Tibet annexion can impose Xinjiang and the Uyghur, can impose the Hong Kong violation of human rights. But Hun Sen should not be allowed to impose at fait accompli the assassination of democracy, because Cambodia is very dependent on the international community. Cambodia is not Russia. Cambodia is not China. Hun Sen is not Putin. Hun Sen is not Xi Jinping. So when we have the means to deal with dictatorship, especially with small dictatorship, we should not treat them as the big dictators. You know, it is there that you can save the principle. That maybe you have abandoned some principle when you have to deal with China and with Russia, but never, not with Hun Sen. At least you stand firm and you show that something is still alive, that your conscience is still alive regarding serious human rights violation. This is the first point. Second point, be careful, because modern time dictators are very clever. They can window dress, you know, they can organize a thing to maintain the appearance of democracy. They say we still have election. Even in Burma, they said after the arrest of Aung San Suu Kyi, the killing, they said we will organize another election in 1 year time. But they specify that the new election they will organize their own way. And what they will do in between, they will dissolve the opposition party. The only credible opposition party led by Aung San Suu Kyi, they will dissolve it before organizing the next election. Then they will secure a landslide victory. Hun Sen is doing the same. Actually, the Burmese junta and the Hun Sen, they are helping each other. They experiment the same formula. Hun Sen, he dissolved the opposition party first, and he organized fake election later. And this allowed him to secure 100% of the seats at the parliament. And the Burmese junta, they want to do the same. It is why I said what Hun Sen did is a soft coup d'etat. It's a kind of daily coup d'etat. They don't call it coup d'etat, but it is a coup d'etat when you dissolve the only opposition in parliament. So you kill democracy. There is no more checks and balance. Then Hun Sen can do whatever he wants, can seize all powers, can silence all the critics. This is a coup d'etat. Without saying coup d'etat, it is a coup d'etat. So I urge you to treat the Burmese case and the Cambodian case in the same way. But Cambodia is even easier to deal with than Burma. One, Cambodia, we have an international treaty called the Paris Agreement on Cambodia, signed in 1991. France signed immediately, the UK signed immediately, but 3 European countries signed a few years later: Germany, the Netherlands, and Poland. What does it mean? It means that those signatories, they committed themselves to defend democracy and human rights in Cambodia. It is not their right, only their right, but it's also their obligation to defend human rights and democracy in Cambodia. Now Hun Sen have assassinated democracy and violate human rights. It is not only your right, but it is your obligation. But in case of Burma, you don't have such an international treaty. It's difficult to find a legal ground, to intervene, but it is as a matter of principle. But in Cambodia, you have a legal ground to do so. First point. Second point, whereas Burma has been used to live in autarky, Burma has not relied on international assistance for decades. They live alone in autarky. But Cambodia cannot survive without international assistance. Since the UN intervened after the Paris Peace Accord in 1991, I was a finance minister at the beginning. I know how dependent Cambodia is on international assistance. Therefore, the international community has leveraged on Cambodia through the economic financial assistance that they don't have, as is the case for Burma. So with these two differences, I think not only you are entitled, but you are equipped to intervene in Cambodia by never accepting fait accompli imposed by Hun Sen. Now, what are the most effective ways? They are contained in the European Parliament resolution yesterday. The targeted sanction based on Magnitsky Act, it will be very effective because those tyrants, they don't care. When the people suffer, the population suffer, they don't care. They hold the population as hostage. But when their interests are hurt directly, then they will care. Therefore, the sanction to freeze their assets abroad, they be very effective to not allow them to come to democratic countries, to Europe, to the US, to Australia, to set food on those countries where they have sent their family, their children to go to study, where they like to go shopping, where they go to have a medical treatment, they have bought a lot of properties. They are used now to this comfort because they know that the situation in Cambodia will not last forever. They take the opportunity to hold on power, to squeeze the country and to send money abroad to prepare for their retirement. But send them the message, no way, you can go retired to come to Europe, to the US, to Australia. You have to be accountable for what you have done recently. So you will be sanctioned if you don't go back to the situation before, you don't restore the opposition, you don't free political prisoners, you don't organize a free and fair, credible election. These are legitimate demand. It is not intervention or whatsoever. It is fulfilling the obligation that Cambodia has accepted itself. So again, thank you for considering this, and thank you for pushing for the implementation of the personal and the targeted sanctions against dictators in Cambodia, but dictators all over the world.
Thank you, Rainsy. Very powerful and clear message. And it was indeed, as you said, the very core of the resolution that the European Parliament has adopted yesterday under the leadership of Svenja. It already in the resolution 2018, Hans, when you were moving the resolution, it was calling on the European Union to start looking at concrete measures, including targeted personal sanctions. Svenja, what is it that we can expect now from the European Union, given that there was this consensus, broad consensus in the European Parliament that the EU must act?
Well, I have actually some hopes on the council. Yesterday, we learned that they're actually moving forward with using this human rights mechanism. We heard that for the first time, actually, at least one Chinese individual was supposed to be on this individual sanctions list, which in itself would be a very big win. So I'm very curious to see on the 22nd of March, the next meeting, if those sanctions actually gonna be taking off, because that would be a good signal that actually the council is not afraid of actually using this mechanism. So this is going to be a very important day, and then we from the Parliament, we will push forward that there's gonna be the sanctions that we're calling for, and especially relevant will be as well what will the status and the impact be of this of the partial withdrawal of the trade preferences. It started last year. It's about 20% withdrawal. Why that? Because it was tried to find a compromise to not harm so much, especially vulnerable people on the ground in the country. So it's always, of course, a very difficult balance. That's why individual sanctions are better in that way, but of course hard to shape. So we will see how this will continue. But Rainsy made it very clear that the international community needs to act and needs to increase the pressure. And this is what we will in the Parliament keep pushing for towards the Commission and the Council, because I think something can happen and it must happen, and we will continue pushing for that.
Senja, you do have parliamentary tools to pressure the Council and the Commission to act, right? You do have hearings with the commissioners, with the council members, with the presidency to act on what you have adopted. So it's not just the text that you have adopted yesterday. It gave you tools to pressure them, right? And
Exactly. We have tools of written question, where we're demanding information about the status of what they're doing. And this is something that I certainly will follow up on. We have hearings, and I'll be pushing. We're having especially hearings in the Trade Committee on this situation, and talking with colleagues in the Foreign Affairs Committee to push forward on this as well, to keep having some spotlight on the situation in Cambodia, and to keep pushing Commission and Council to act on this.
And what I found extremely remarkable, Sven, in what you were saying, when you were discussing with the political groups the decision, you were being concerned whether your actions will have an impact on the ordinary people, on the vulnerable people. It's kind of schizophrenic. The Hun Sen regime, or Hun Sen himself, does not care whether his actions are going to provoke international reaction that is going to hit the most vulnerable people. You, the European politicians, are taking care about the vulnerable people in Cambodia. It's really difficult to comprehend how these dictators actually put their people on the side. You also suggested, I read the resolution, you do not threaten only to the country, you suggest some democratic initiative mechanism from the European Union to come up with. What was it all about?
Absolutely. I mean, of course, as I said, there is a way back to democracy, but the question is also how. So I think it's important that the European Union isn't only saying this is the pressure that we're putting, but is also offering a help for dialogue and supporting the way back to democracy. And I think that will only go through dialogue with all players of society, with the opposition, with civil society actors. And I think that the European Union can play a supporting role in that. That is some aspects that we had in these resolutions as well.
But Emil, what we should also do, what I told, is involve our leadership. Our leadership means in the European Parliament, the group leaders should also press for this. When they speak in their family meetings, for instance, the pre-summits, with their prime ministers, that will help. We have Charles Michel, who is president of the European Council, and he has taken initiatives, for instance, also in the Caucasus, in Georgia. So he can also do the same concerning Cambodia. So we should indeed align all the troops to say, to come to action, because otherwise it takes too long. But Svenja is very well connected, and I'm of help as party president where I can be of help, of course.
Emil, could I point to another aspect of sanctions? It's the psychological and political aspect of sanctions. It's related to the name and shame approach. It has far-reaching consequences because it goes against, it combats the propaganda of dictators. Dictators, they pretend that what they have done are right. Now everybody accept the fait accompli. They don't use the word fait accompli. They said it is normal. Everything has become normal. The rest of the world has started to behave as before. So meaning acknowledging, recognizing, endorsing their bad deeds. But the fact that they are sanctioned, whatever kind of sanction, but when you name a country, a regime, that this is subject to sanction, It means that you condemn them, at least morally, politically. This is important. Because among those who are around dictators, some people could ask, why are we being sanctioned, ostracized? We must have done something wrong. It is not as easy, as clear as the dictator himself pretends. No, it raised question in the surrounding of dictators. And for far-looking people, more progressive people will have the courage and the foundation to challenge, you know, the bad deeds of any dictator. This is the first thing. The second, when it comes to economic and financial situation, there are impact, because when investors, they look for a country where to invest, you know, they look at all aspects. All things being equal, they would avoid countries that are subject to sanction, because there are potential problem pointed by the fact that the international community put sanction. So the impact is that investors would avoid, you know, such a country, and they will hurt those regime, and they will increase the popular discontent. What the hell are you doing? You see, our country now is being avoided because of sanction, and the sanction are you because of your bad action against your own people. So don't forget this aspect of political and psychological aspect of sanction. Name and shame. Continue to name and shame those people.
Thank you, Rainsy. This is extremely valuable because it raises the understanding that sanctions actually do have value, and they're not a purpose in themselves. They're a subsequent, or they're a consequence of actions that have been taken by the dictators. And one very important element that you brought up is that many of the companies who are investing in Cambodia do come from democratic countries, from European countries, from North America as well. And they share responsibility for what is happening in the country by investing in a country where they know that the regime is abusing their own people. Can I also ask you about what do you expect in regional terms? I mean, as Hans was accomplice in supporting your return, when you were not allowed to enter Cambodia, you were allowed then to enter Malaysia, where that was run by now opposition, and you were received by the foreign minister. Does that make Malaysian then government accomplice in the crime of you, or the Indonesian government because they welcomed you in Jakarta?
I think there are new trends in ASEAN. There are two opposing theories. One is the non-interference. Say, non-interference in other countries' internal affair. But another aspect is solidarity. In Indonesia, you know, the founding principle of the Indonesia, the modern Indonesia, is called Pancasila, the five principles. And one of the principles is called humanity. When you talk about humanity, you consider humanity as a whole and single entity. So you belong to humanity, and your people all over the world belong to humanity. This implies solidarity, because you cannot stand idle when another part of humanity is in trouble or is suffering. Indonesia, they raised about the Rohingya. They are Muslim like Indonesian people. And when they talk about humanity, but the Rohingya is humanity next door. Can we stand idle? So there are principles, you know, even in Asian, it's so-called Asian values, etc. There are notion of humanity and solidarity. And now within ASEAN, there are different groups and parties who try to come together to promote an alternative ASEAN. Alternative ASEAN based of common values. And these, we look up at the European Union as a very inspiring regional grouping, a grouping that is based not on a common market, on a common policy, or even on a common currency, but common values. This is important. It is the only worth building regional grouping based on common values. Inspiring example. I think this example will take root in ASEAN countries, and one day we will see the emergence of an alternative ASEAN that will be built on the same model as the European Union.
That is very important to understand that this is not about Europeans or Westerners discussing about what is happening in Cambodia, but that this kind of notion and understanding has traction among the people in the region.
Yes.
It's worth to point out that on the elections in Cambodia, even more than 50% of the Cambodians voted for the opposition, just as it was the case that the majority of the Burmese voted for NLD in Burma. These are facts. So this is not about Europeans supporting some political opponents who are fighting for liberal democracy in Asia. This is about standing for what the majority of the peoples of this country want. And this is what we need to emphasize. And I guess Svenja and Hans will agree that this is the very core of why this international cooperation is so important. And I see a lot of comments here saying millions of dollars, billions of euros have been invested by the Europeans or the Americans in building up Cambodia in the last 3 decades to come, whatever it is. It's also about the financial support that comes from European taxpayers. So I guess it's a good message that you said, Svenja, that the next summit of ASEM, Asia-Europe Summit, should not take place in Cambodia. That was finally included in the resolution, right?
Yeah, we had it in, and EPP tried to get it out, but they were not successful. I think it's actually an important part as well, because it's about symbolics as well. And so, I mean, it's a forum of cooperation, and I think this is a very bad place and time then to happen there now.
Yeah, it's vital. It's vital because if you honor Hun by having this ASEM meeting in Phnom Penh, that is crazy. So I'm very happy, Svenja, that you were able to keep this in. I have no clue why EPP would like to take it out. It's because you can't have ASEM in Phnom Penh. It's impossible. And furthermore, again, Rainsy is right. Human rights issues are part of humanity. They're international issues. So a country can never say this is home rule. This is not something which you should interfere. There's also the Chinese issue. They say with the Uyghurs, you shouldn't interfere because it's a national issue. No, human rights are not a national issue. They're an international issue.
And because there is the international issue, since the World War II was ended, all the nations have subscribed to the UN Declaration for Human Rights. Rainsy, what is the way forward? The EP resolution, the European Parliament resolution from yesterday, speaks about the trials, but it also mentions something very critical. It recalls that the Cambodian government has called for the local elections in June 2022, and the resolution of the European Parliament says, without participation of CNRP, do not recognize those elections as credible, as legitimate. So what are the next steps then?
In the resolution, there is another point that is very meaningful. It said that because those elections, the last elections, were not legitimate, therefore the current regime is not legitimate either. So this is very important to delegitimize dictatorship that pretend to be the reflection of the will of the people. It is not true. The will of the people is reflected through election. But if elections are fake, are manipulated, so the legitimacy of the regime is at stake. This is very important point, because then you hurt the dictatorship on their heart. because when they lose legitimacy, they will lose everything. As I have just point about investment, about lending, not Hun Sen goes asking to borrow money all over the world. But if the lenders now realize that this regime is not legitimate, as pointed out by the European Union, European Parliament, they will think twice before lending money to an illegitimate government. But who will repay them one day? When there is a democratic and legitimate government, they will lose their money by lending money to a dictatorship. So this will weaken, indirectly will weaken dictatorship. When you raise the issue of their very legitimacy through the legitimacy of election. It is why there are crucial points in the resolution, yesterday's resolution. You raise the issue of election, free and fair election, absence of the opposition, coming back to a one-party state because there is no opposition. Therefore, there is no legitimacy. So the financial and economic and political impact of this are far-reaching.
And to add one point, perhaps, that our Cambodian listeners will understand, that the European Union is only positively intended towards Cambodia. Is perhaps the news that broke some 10 days ago, that over 300,000 vaccines against COVID-19 from the COVAX mechanism arrived in Cambodia. And COVAX mechanism is predominantly financed by the European taxpayers. So it is worth noting that the European politicians or even European citizens do not only reflect about politics in Cambodia, but they have the Cambodian people in the midst of their heart. And I guess we should express gratitude to all the Europeans for ensuring that the ordinary people of Cambodia are being put at the very core of what the European Union does in its relations with Cambodia. Any final words, Svenja, Hans, Rainsy?
Svenja.
Thank you very much, and especially thank you very much, Rainsy, for sharing your story with us, for being such a champion for your home country and not giving up. You're truly an inspiration for fighting for democracy. And I can reassure you that here in the European Parliament, especially us liberals, will keep on fighting for democracy with you.
Yes, and what Rainsy said, never ever give up, and don't accept vessels on complete of dictators. We should not do so, and we should fight on. Thank you.
My last word is again to thank all the liberal friends. I'm more than happy, I'm proud to be part of the liberal family. And I can assure you that liberalism is more vibrant in Cambodia, in ASEAN, in Asia, than some people may think. Dictators, they want to hide the fact that at the bottom of our heart, each one of us is liberal. If you care for human dignity, for social justice, for freedom, you are a liberal by definition. You don't need to call yourself liberal, but we are liberals in our heart. And this ideal will prevail, and the whole world will see it in the near future, thanks to the support of liberals from all over the world.
Thank you, Rainsy, for these noble words, which are really wonderful. And it touches the hearts of everybody who is listening, and not only in Europe, not only in Cambodia, but across the world. It's time for action. It's time for action in Europe, in United States, in Canada, in Australia. This is a webinar that goes through Liberal International, which is a global family. It's time for action from the Asian friends as well, to ensure that the will of the majority of the people in Cambodia is being addressed. Thank you very much. We will keep on bringing up this issue. We will keep up raising the attention of Cambodia until, as Rainsy said, our final, what we have as a goal, to have liberals touch the heart of everybody across the world and in Cambodia. thank you very much for attending this webinar.
Pleasure.
But now, Philippines. So, si, oui, j'ai le link.